Kodak Video Programs proudly announces a brand new video series of animal programs for children of all ages. Titled Animals in Action, this 12-volume video series combines fun and fact as you meet animals of all sizes and all shapes up close. See how animals live and adapt to their world. Laugh at rare moments of animals at play. Learn all about the differences of animals, how they move, talk, see at night, build their homes. With beautiful photography by award-winning Survival Anglia Limited, Animals in Action is a series you'll want to collect and enjoy over and over again.
There's no question what this is. Or, for that matter, what this is. There are literally thousands of different kinds of frogs and toads in a whole rainbow of colors and every kind of shape and size imaginable. Get ready for some surprises as we investigate the weird and wonderful world of frogs. Hello, I'm Thane Maynard, and welcome to Animals in Action. We've got an amazing cast of characters lined up for today's show. Amazing to look at, amazing to listen to, and amazing to watch as they go about their daily lives. And here to help me keep track of this remarkable and far-reaching family of frogs and toads is Keith Shackleton at the drawing board.
Hello. They really are incredible, aren't they? Every size, shape, color in these little animals.
That's right. We'll have a chance to examine all the varieties in a moment, but let's start out with some of the basic features common to almost all frogs. These huge bulbous eyes are typical. The eyes, nostrils, and eardrum are all in a line, so only a small part of the frog is visible above water. They have to have such large eyes because they're nearly all nocturnal. This is a green tree frog, but not all frogs are green. Far from it. The one thing they do all have in common is that they all hop. The powerful hind legs are much larger than the front ones, pushing the frogs forward. If we look at the feet, we can see that some frogs have special adaptations. This is a tree frog clinging to a sheet of glass. At the end of each toe, there's what looks like a sucker. Those swollen tips allow the tree frog to climb about among the leaves and branches where it lives. Some never even come to the ground. Keith, you know the way a tree frog can actually hang on a piece of glass in an aquarium?
Yeah.
It gives a lot of people the mistaken idea that they have a suction cup right on the end of their toe. Could you draw what they actually hold themselves up with?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about this, you know, because I thought they had suction cups on their toes for years until someone pointed this out. If that's the smooth surface, the little toe is spread out at the end, we noticed that. And it looks like a sucker, but it's not. It's just to increase the area of contact with the surface. Inside the toe, there's a gland which secretes a sticky substance all the way along, which undoubtedly helps it a lot. But the important part is this, that undersurface is absolutely covered with thousands of tiny hairs, so tiny that they can lock into crevices, would you believe, in smooth glass, let alone in a leaf.
That's amazing. And another sticky feature shared by most frogs and toads is their long, sticky tongue. This is a narrow-mouthed toad from Africa eating termites. Here's a running frog doing the same. The actual strike is so quick that even in slow motion, it's difficult to follow the action. It'll eat 40 or 50 in one sitting. Well, I hope that toad enjoyed its dinner. Keith, you know, the one thing everybody knows about frogs is those incredible sounds they make.
Yeah.
You know, all the croaking and ribbiting. Well, how does such a little guy make such a big noise?
And that's what I asked myself about Scotsman Thane with the bagpipes. It's the same principle. We've got two little frogs here looking out of a lily pond at us. But let's take a typical frog. Now, there is a vocal sac, a balloon that's blown up with air from the frog's lungs. Now, when that's full, it'll be pumped back into the lungs again and back and forth between throat sac and lungs over a resonator. The throat sac itself acts as an amplifier and increases the noise so that you can hear it for miles. And the sounds are so different because the throat sacs are different. You'll get another sort of frog that's got two little ones, one either side, like that, and they'll blow up together. There's even one, the most extraordinary one of all, that's got an ordinary one throat sac here like that, but it's got two little ones on it that stand up just like that, and I think that's really amazing.
It is, it's phenomenal. You know, it's only the males who do all the croaking, and they do it to attract a female during the breeding season. But each species makes its own unique sound, so there's no confusion among the frogs. The variety is unbelievable, not only in the noises they make, but also in the songs they sing. All frogs and toads belong to a group called amphibians, which comes from the Greek meaning double life animals. They start life as water animals, equipped with gills and living totally underwater like fish. And then they undergo a remarkable transformation that turns them into land-dwelling animals that can breathe air directly. Keith, could you show us how this life cycle actually works?
I think so, Thane. Well, we got a frog here to begin it all, a typical frog, all wet and slippery out of the pond. Now, that's an adult, so you might expect eggs from that. And what you'd get is this kind of thing, jelly with black spots. Now, there might be just one according to the species, or there might be 10,000, because these do vary so much. But what about the next stage? Well, inside the egg it's changing shape. It's elongating. We go a little bit further and we find that out of the egg comes a very familiar little animal, a tadpole. Now, that tadpole is going to grow till he becomes quite a shapely animal. But he's still very much an underwater animal, breathing with gills. But in time, you'll notice that back legs are forming. And a little bit later on, front legs are forming. Give it a while longer, and you've got an animal that is beginning to leave the water and jump up onto the land. And it's an animal that is beginning to look very much more like a frog, except that it's still got a little stumpy tail here. And finally, we're back to where we started, and we've got an adult frog again.
That's right. And although this pattern is typical of most frogs, there's considerable variation from one species to the next. This American bullfrog has already found a mate, and the pair are ready to spawn. The eggs are laid in large clumps surrounded by a protective jelly. There may be several hundred eggs in each clump. Within a few days, the eggs begin to change shape. They elongate and start to take form. Two days later, and the little tadpoles are hanging onto the outside of the jelly. Within 2 weeks, the tadpoles are free swimming and feeding. They'll eat almost anything, plants or dead animals. The next stage is the appearance of legs. The hind legs develop first while the tadpole continues to grow. The tadpole's mouth is well equipped with rows of teeth, which it'll shed before it becomes a frog. The front legs appear next, usually one at a time. Its lungs are already developing, and soon it will make its first excursion out of the water. The tail is beginning to lose its fins and shrink. The hind legs are growing and looking more like frog's legs, ready to leap away from danger. The tail is merely a little stump now, completely absorbed. It's now a fully formed, inch-long frog. The African bullfrog is a much larger creature altogether. Males can reach 8 inches in length and width. The females are tiny and almost disappear with egg laying. Unlike the clumps of the American bullfrog, this one scatters its eggs all over the bottom of the pool. She may lay up to 6,000 at a time. The tadpoles develop and hatch very quickly. They have to because these pools are only a temporary feature on the African countryside. They'll soon dry up. As the drought sets in, the tadpoles, struggling in what little water remains, turn cannibalistic and begin to eat each other. It really is a case of survival of the fittest. Those that do survive develop into little frogs within 3 to 4 weeks. Compare that to the American bullfrog that takes 2 years. Now they have to feed furiously on anything they can find in order to fatten themselves up to see them through the long dry season. I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Bufo. It's short for Bufo marinus, the Latin name of the marine toad. They're also called the giant toad, and they eat so many insects they've been imported into places like Florida and Hawaii and even Australia to take care of pests. The trouble is, those folks have found out they don't just eat insects, they eat everything, and now they're even a bigger pest than the things they've come to take care of. But to keep themselves from being eaten, they've got some great tricks. You can see he's kind of blown up with air. That's to make him look tougher and harder to swallow. But his best defense are these poison sacs, one behind his eye, and then along his belly, and another one on his hind leg. That one's to keep him from being attacked from behind by a snake or something. The poison they secrete is strong enough to kill a dog or to make a human seriously ill. Now, even though they're called the marine toad, they don't live in the sea. They live in brackish waters, partly salty. And even though they're the giant toad, they don't have a giant tadpole. They have a very tiny tadpole that changes into a very tiny toad like this one, and they take over 7 years to mature. Now, Bufo's a male, and he's only about half as big as a female giant toad. They're the biggest in the world, and they grow to be as big as a football. But now back to a frog's idea of heaven, the West Indian rainforest on the island of Trinidad. This place is also a frog watcher's paradise. Warm and humid, perfect for frogs. Their calls can be heard almost anywhere, day and night. These are the tadpoles of one of the many species of tree frogs that live here. Each one looks like a typical tadpole, but what's interesting is the fact that they throng together, moving around in large, solid clumps of 200 or 300. There's safety in numbers, and the tadpoles escape predators by looking like one large animal moving through the water. As soon as they develop their adult characteristics, then they live as individuals and disperse into the vegetation around the river. They'll reach their adult size in 2 or 3 years. Most frogs sleep tucked up in the leaves during the day, becoming active only after dark, hunting among the branches for moths and other insects. This is a giant tree frog, one of the world's largest. It has a very special way of breeding. It's one of a small group of frogs that actually builds its own breeding pool. There it is, within a few feet of the river's edge. It's about 1 foot across, and inside the frogs have laid their eggs. It's timed to the rains so that once the eggs have hatched, the river will flood and wash the tadpoles away.
The giant tree frogs. Well, the behavior of those tree frogs didn't look all that special. But in fact, it's very canny indeed. Now, if we have a little sketch here, I'll show you. This is a lot of bamboo, a clump of bamboo beside a river. And it's the bamboo is where the tree frogs live. Right, well, here comes the river in diagram, just a section of the river, like that. Bank the other side. And there's the level of the water. Now, these tree frogs dig themselves out a little hole on the other bank there. And that fills up to the same level because the water filters through the gravel. They've therefore got themselves a little private breeding pool, and there go the eggs. And those eggs are going to hatch into tadpoles. And the tadpoles will be confined in there, and they'll need food. But it's so arranged that the rains come about then, and up goes the level of the water, and they can swim free because they're now in the main body of the river. But the canny thing about it, from the tree frog's point of view, was that those young have been got over the first hurdle when they're tiny and when every predator is against them.
You can see that each egg has only a minimum of protective jelly. It doesn't need more because it's safe in its breeding pool. After a few days, the eggs are beginning to change shape and wriggle. Each tadpole has a large supply of yolk to keep them going until the river floods. The plants of Trinidad are abundant and very diverse. These are bromeliads, a large group of plants that grow all over the wetter parts of the tropics. They're well known as houseplants too, but they grow high up among the trees, just like ferns and orchids sometimes grow. At the base of each leaf, there's a little pool of rainwater collected by the leaves. It's here that several species of frogs have adapted to live. This is one of the rarest. It has no common name, but it's known to science as Amphotis. It doesn't just live here, it breeds here too. Two or three eggs are laid in each pool, and the tadpole feed on rotting vegetation and drowned insects. Amazingly, this little frog is only found in one species of bromeliad at the top of one mountain on one island, Trinidad. We've moved to Africa now to look at yet another species of frog with a curious way of breeding. The burrowing frog actually lays its eggs in an underground chamber close to a pond. There it sits on them until they hatch. As soon as the tadpoles hatch, they slither all over her body, and she keeps them moist with water stores in her bladder. She's dug a tunnel down to the pool, and after a few days, the tadpoles begin to slide down it. Once they make it to the pool, they'll develop normally, and after changing into frogs, will immediately burrow into the soil. It's just another case of a frog protecting its eggs from danger. South America is the home of the poison arrow frogs, a beautiful and yet deadly group of little frogs. Native Indians catch the frogs and use their skin secretions to tip their arrows, and it's the most potent natural poison known. The poison arrow frogs are tree frogs, not pond frogs, so there's always a problem about keeping the tadpoles moist. To solve it, they have developed a remarkable adaptation. They actually carry the tadpoles around on their backs until they find a suitable place to leave them. While we're still on the subject of South American poison arrow frogs, I'd like to bring up something I often get asked about. Young people especially want to know, if I handle a frog or a toad, will I get warts? Keith, have you ever heard that question?
Yeah, I was brought up on that one.
That's right. Well, the answer is obviously no. Frogs and toads look warty, but they don't cause warts in others. But it should be pointed out that a number of amphibians do secrete poisons that are mildly irritating to human skin, and that the poison arrow frog secretes a poison that is potentially deadly. So I guess I'd say show a little caution in handling most frogs and toads, but don't worry about warts. Yes, frogs and toads are remarkable, each species with its own special adaptations. The whole variety of noises they make and the apparatus they have to make them. The extraordinary places where they lay their eggs, and even more extraordinary ways they look after their tadpoles. But amazingly, even with the tremendous variety we've seen today, we've still only glimpsed the tip of the iceberg. There's one frog, would you believe, that actually rears its tadpoles in its stomach. Well, I'll leave you now pondering the sort of problems that one might lead to. Join us again next time for more Animals in Action. Hello, I'm Thane Maynard, and welcome to Animals in Action. Today, Keith Shackleton and I are going to examine the two distinct kinds of baby birds there are in the world. First, the birds that are still helpless after they hatch and must be cared for. And second, birds that are ready to go when they hatch and require no rearing at all. They're really quite different from each other.
They are. You could use those splendid words nidicolous and nidifugus.
You know, those are scientific terms. We could also use altricial and precocial. The trouble is nobody'd know what we were talking about.
Well, I know. Well, anyhow, this one's a nidifugus bird. A little chick just out of the egg. Look at it. Bright eyes, bushy tail, what there is of it. Everything ready to go. Great big knobbly knees, feet 2 sizes too big, but feet that are already carry it along. Now look at the other one, the nidicolous one. Here you've got a real tragedy coming up. We'll start with the mouth always open. That distressing yellow stuff around the edge of it. Huge eye that's not yet open. And a scrawny little neck pointing upwards there, little limp wings. A huge belly like that. And the legs all thin and poor and weak, and still completely useless. And no feathers except that sort of thing. Isn't it a tragedy? You'd have to be its mother to love a thing like that.
You know, to keep things simple, why don't we refer to them as nest lodgers and nest leavers? A nest lodger would be like this baby robin, and a nest leaver would be like this young plover. But why don't we go now and see some other nest lodgers? Nest lodgers put most of their energy into their chicks. Typically, the parent birds, such as these rooks, build a nest that's designed to protect the eggs and, more importantly, the chicks when they arrive. Most nest lodgers lay clutches of about 2 to 6 relatively small eggs. The chicks hatch from the egg after a short incubation period of about 18 days, but will stay in the nest for another 30. A safe and secure nest is important because the chicks hatch blind, naked, and completely helpless. They depend totally on their parents to provide food and to keep them warm until their down feathers have grown. As the chicks of nest lodgers hatch after a short incubation period, they have little time to develop in the egg, so they break out as naked weaklings. Although blind and helpless, the nestlings have a voracious appetite, and satisfying them is a full-time job. Every 30 minutes or so, the parents return with a mouthful of grubs, worms, or insects. The chick's bright red mouth acts as a signal to stimulate the adults to pop food down its throat. Rooks nest in colonies known as rookeries. There will be chicks of varying ages and sizes within the community. These youngsters are almost ready to desert the nest, and any day now they'll take the plunge. A huge pile of sticks serves as a nest for an African fish eagle. It takes weeks of carrying one stick at a time to complete the structure. The eagles put a great deal of energy into building a strong and safe nest for the chicks. The tender care they show when they're feeding their young nestlings is remarkable, considering that sharp-hooked bill is also capable of inflicting a fatal blow to their prey. An adult albatross has to fly far out to sea to collect fish to feed its chick. It would have to make an enormous number of journeys back and forth if it only returned with a beakful after each trip. To save time and energy, it fills its crop full of fish and then regurgitates the semi-digested meal to its hungry chick. As far as parental care goes, the pigeon is exceptional among birds. It secretes a substance called pigeon milk from glands in its crop, which is very like rabbit's milk in content. This is one of the most extraordinary of all nest lodgers. The bird in question is the red-billed hornbill. Hornbills live in Africa, where the baobab trees provide ideal homes. The trunks are hollow and the branches full of holes, which the hornbills nest in. The most remarkable thing about hornbills is that the female plasters herself up inside the nest. She seals the entrance with droppings and mud until only a small slit is left. The family relies on the male to provide them with a constant supply of grasshoppers, grubs, and moths. These incredible scenes inside the nest were filmed by replacing the side of the tree with glass, and the birds accepted the arrangement quite happily. The male works hard to satisfy the demands of his hungry family. Returning every few minutes, he delicately passes a tasty morsel through the narrow hole to the female, who in turn feeds her feeble chicks. The chicks grow fast, and before long there isn't enough room inside the tree for the whole family. By this stage, the female has been sealed in for 6 weeks, and it's time for her to escape to freedom. She chisels and chips away at the solid blocked entrance until she's made a hole just large enough to squeeze through. Outside, she's greeted with enthusiasm by her mate as she stretches her cramped wings. As soon as their mother vacates the nestlings instinctively begin to seal up the entrance hole again. Their parents assist in the building work by providing them with fresh supplies of droppings and mud. It can take the chicks 4 days of non-stop plastering to reduce the hole to a mere slit again. They are also brought slimy slugs and sticky berries, which the chicks rub around the entrance. This helps to glue the mud and droppings together to form a hard, tough seal. The chicks spend a further 3 weeks sealed inside their impenetrable fortress. As they get older and bigger, the adults provide them with more satisfying meals. Instead of looking for insects up in the trees, they search the ground for lizards and frogs and large grasshoppers too. Finally, it is time for the chicks to break out. Well, at least for one of them. The female hornbill lays her eggs 48 hours apart, but because she's sealed in with them, she starts incubating them both right away, and the chicks hatch out 2 days apart. And this 2-day gap makes life complicated. When the eldest starts to chip away at the entrance to get out, the youngest is determined to stay sealed in and continues to plaster up the hole. Eventually, the eldest makes an escape and leaves the youngest to sit it out alone for another 2 days. For the bird left alone, it's a spell of waiting until the clock ticking away in its brain determines exactly when it'll be ready to leave the safety of the nest. Outside, the elder bird is taken readily to the trees. The whole family stays close at hand, ready to encourage the youngest member when its time is up. There are frights and false starts. Halfway through opening up the hole, the chick panics and starts to plaster it up again. But hour by hour, the drive to leave the nest grows stronger. At long last, the second chick is ready to venture into the great outside, and this time pecks with earnest. Instinct finally wins over fear, but not without one final moment of panic. Still clinging on, it tries to return to the nest, but there's no turning back. It's not exactly graceful, but then it is its maiden flight. In terms of energy and effort, the hornbills put in their full quota, but then they are more successful at raising young than any other hole nesting species in Africa. Now, most birds are either nest lodgers or nest leavers, but there is always a nonconformist in any group, and among birds it tends to be the sea dwellers that nest up in the rocky caves overlooking the ocean. They don't really fit into either group, because although they build a solid nest and the chicks stay in the nest for a long time, they hatch out bright-eyed, alert, and well-feathered. Let's investigate why these birds refuse to conform. At the start of the breeding season, adult puffins gather at the traditional breeding grounds. Puffins mate for life, and in spring, old partners meet up again and greet each other. They nest at the top of cliffs in burrows usually dug by rabbits, although they're not beyond digging their own if necessary. The females lay a single egg at the end of the burrow, far enough to be out of the sight of a predatory gull. As soon as the breeding season is in full swing, there's a lot of toing and froing along the cliff. Puffins are cautious, rarely doing anything in a hurry. Before they will enter the nest burrow, they check to make sure the coast is clear. As soon as one bird is relieved of duty, it heads out to sea to fish. They are squat, heavy little birds, and they use the vertical drop from the cliff to launch themselves into the air. Bobbing like a rubber duck in a bathtub, the puffins snorkel for schools of fish. They can carry as many as 16 fish lined up in a row across their bill and held in place by their tongue. But it's when they return that the trouble begins. They fly towards land in large groups in an attempt to confuse the marauding gulls. From experience, the puffins know that the gulls will be waiting, hidden in the long grass. So the puffins maintain a constant lookout. The seagulls prefer to steal from the puffins rather than fishing for themselves. A puffin hurries toward its nest because if the gulls are successful in their attack, the chick deep in the burrow will go hungry. When the chick is 6 weeks old, its parents desert it and return to the sea. After several days, the chick gets hungry and is forced reluctantly to leave the safety of its burrow. Although it hatches as a fluffy, well-developed chick, it couldn't possibly leave the nest and follow its parents. Only when it's strong and fully fledged with waterproof feathers can it hope to survive the leap from the cliff top down into the sea. Below the puffins on the narrow cliff ledges, the murres nest. The ledges are a safe haven since they're impossible to reach except by air. In late January, after months at sea, the murres gather on their nesting ledges. At first, they leave plenty of space between each bird. But suitable nesting sites are few and far between, and the ledges soon fill up with jostling birds. They don't need much room because murres make no nest. They simply incubate the egg on their feet. The chicks hatch alert and feathered. A good thing, too. A weak, blind, helpless youngster would soon fall off the cliff. But as an added precaution, for the first few days, one adult stands between the chicks and the cliff edge. We've seen that murres don't make a nest at all, but just lay their eggs straight onto the rock ledge. It may look a little precarious, but the egg is the secret. It's very pointed on one end and pear-shaped, and that way if it's knocked, it rolls in a circle instead of rolling off the ledge. I'll show you how it's worked. I'll roll this egg from an Atlantic murre, and you can see it rolls in a circle. Isn't that neat? Keith has drawn another specialized cliff nesting bird for us.
Yes, I've got another cliff nester here. It's one of the gulls, a kittiwake. But unlike the murres, kittiwakes do build a nest, and they build a very big one too. Seaweed mostly, and mud, and very carefully stuck and bonded to the narrowest of ledges. They're much more secure than you'd ever think. And there they sit up there. Now, they're deep cup nests, these, and when the young hatch, straight away they develop a special claw for holding firmly onto the edge. It's just another adaptation for the cliffside way of life.
Now let's go out into the country to look at some nest leavers, or as Keith likes to call them, nidificus birds. The English partridge is a perfect example. Nest leavers, like the partridge, don't build an elaborate nest because their chicks leave home very young. The hen lays a large number of eggs because she's usually left alone to rear her brood, and is likely to lose more chicks to predators than a nest lodger. Nest leavers usually lay large eggs because the chicks need a lot of nourishment in order to hatch out fully feathered and ready to face life. For the first few hours, the chicks snuggle up to their mother. This instinctive reaction is called imprinting. Imprinting ensures that they'll follow their mother and her calls wherever she goes. Within an hour or so of hatching, the chicks are ready to follow their mother out into the fields. Imprinting makes sure that each youngster recognizes and sticks close to its own mother. The parents never actually feed their precocious young. From birth, the chicks instinctively know how to peck and what to peck at. But the female will show them where there is plenty of food, often calling them over. Out in the open and unable to fly, the chicks are vulnerable. Stoats are their greatest enemies. The female stoat has seen our partridge family and bounds off home to fetch her young. But the partridge hens saw the stoat too, and quickly lead their broods as far away as possible. With hungry mouths to feed, the stoat calls her cubs out for the hunt. But the partridges are already well out of the way, and the stoat won't be able to follow too far because she has her young with her. In the safety of the wheat field and camouflaged against their background, the partridges slow down to feed on swarms of sawfly larvae. Sawflies are related to wasps and ants and do a great deal of damage to crops. The partridge chicks gobble down large quantities of larvae, and so do the farmers of favor. Here's another nest leaver out on the plains of Africa. Ostriches nest right out in the open so that the sitting bird can spot danger from miles around. But in this position, the chicks, when they hatch, are in danger. The adults almost immediately lead them to the safety of the bush, where they have a better chance of remaining hidden from predators. The parents of this little fellow really do invest all their energy into the egg, but the chick never meets its parents, and even if it did, they'd probably chase it off into the bush. The bird is called a malleefowl, and Keith will explain the strange way they're cared for.
Well, a really special thing about malleefowl is that they just don't sit on their eggs at all. This is how the system works. They start by scraping out a hollow in the ground, shallow hollow like that, and begin filling it with leaves from the forest floor, leaf litter, piling it up and piling it up to a pretty big height. Now, as that rots, it's like a garden compost heap. Heat is generated. The eggs are then laid in the top of the heap. And then they'll be covered over with a layer of sand, earth. And there they are. I'll just draw you a little malleefowl up there so that you see the scale, because this is a very high mound. It could be, 10 feet high. There's the little malleefowl, bit like a pheasant. There she sits on the top. Now, I say they don't sit on their eggs, but they do look after them very carefully indeed, because the eggs have got to be kept at exactly the right temperature, 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And the birds are able to tell within a degree, by testing it, what the temperature is. And here's how they organize things. If it's too hot, they'll move some of that soil away to let the heat escape. If it's a cold night, then they'll put more back on it. And that way they'll juggle around until everything's absolutely ready. The eggs then hatch, and the little malleefowl chick will dig its way out till it gets to the surface, and away it'll go. And it won't be walking away. As often as not, it'll be flying away. And there's no other bird that can fly more or less straight from the egg.
As you can imagine, the parents have to work around the clock to make sure the mound interior stays precisely the right temperature. It's totally instinctive, and don't forget, the parents never even lay eyes on their young after they hatch. Up in the highlands of Scotland, hidden in a hole high in a tree, a female goosander sits quietly while her family hatches around her. The baby birds hatch bedraggled and damp from the egg, but their feathers will soon dry and fluff out. Meanwhile, a thick layer of down keeps them snug. There's nothing helpless about these ducklings, and within 24 hours, they're all ready to leap into action. In the case of a goosander, this means literally. Most ducks nest on the ground, and following mother from the nest presents no problem. But for tree nesting goosanders, it's not quite so straightforward. Incredibly, they all survive the shock to the system. It's almost as if they were made out of rubber. In moments, they found their feet and march off to join their anxious mom out on the water. Like the partridge and ostrich chicks, the ducklings' early imprinting drives them on to stick close to their mother, with a special incentive of a free ride on her back. It's particularly important the brood stick together. Stragglers are easy prey for birds like a heron. Involved in a tug-of-war over a worm, 3 ducklings lag behind. But fortunately, their mother's close at hand to lead them to safety away down the falls. From the moment they plunge into the stream, the ducklings swim and splash around as if they'd spent a lifetime in the water. Their mother will guide and protect them for about 4 weeks, by which time they'll be quite capable of fending for themselves. The watery world is a hazardous one, especially when there are characters like this around. The pheasant-tailed jacana of Southeast Asia has developed a system which tends to defeat most of its enemies most of the time. Firstly, its nest, a floating pile of soggy water weeds, is beautifully camouflaged. Like all nest leavers, jacanas don't build elaborate nests. A well-constructed nest is only necessary if a family of helpless weaklings are to be housed in it for several weeks. Jacanas live in tropical countries. In this species, it's the male who builds the nest and hatches the eggs. The female simply lays eggs and courts several males to hatch them. This species is called the pheasant-tailed jacana for obvious reasons. This watchful father senses danger and looks nervously around him. The males will leave the nest when necessary in an attempt to draw attention away from the eggs. In the heat and humidity of the tropics, the eggs will continue to develop without being closely and continuously incubated by the male. The crocodile knows there's a meal around somewhere. It's just a matter of hunting it down. To save this clutch from disaster, the male resorts to desperate measures. Jacanas often build more than one nest as an insurance policy, and in this situation, more than one nest is going to prove useful. The male rolls the eggs several yards across the water toward the safety of the other platform. Amazingly, the eggs survive this dunking. They're coated with a waterproof layer, and the water isn't too cold. The jacana is torn between the need to keep still so as to not attract attention and the desire to save his last egg. His paternal instincts prove the stronger. The smell of the bird and eggs is strong at the old nest site, and the confused crocodile continues to search in the wrong place. The male bobs nervously. He's still upset, but his tactics have paid off. You know, Keith, you have to wonder why there are two such distinct groups of baby birds. Some that require so much training and some that take care of themselves.
It's a puzzle, Thane, isn't it? You know, I think the reason is quite simple. I think it's what the birds are going to do in afterlife that decides this. Now, this little chick here, there are a lot of birds in this category, all the game birds, a lot of the waders, ostriches, ducks, geese, and swans, all these sort of birds that more or less straight from the egg have got food around them. They know where to go and what to do and how to do it. In this category are birds that have got a much more specialized life ahead of them. Even birds like robins are hunters. They've got to learn the craft of hunting. Eagles start like that. After all, we start like that in a pretty helpless state, and it takes us a very long time to learn our jobs, isn't it?
That's right. You can compare it with human training. The more skilled a person must be on the job, the more time it takes to train them. In the case of a lawyer, it's 18 or 19 years of training. And for most doctors, it's more like 21 or 22 years.
Yeah, for wildlife artists, you never learn it all, and you carry on till you drop dead.
Thanks for being with us, and I hope you'll join us next time for another look at Animals in Action. Hello, I'm Thane Maynard, and welcome to Animals in Action. 400 years ago, people used to walk around in outfits like this one. It was a pretty good way to protect yourself back then. But today, we'll be looking at animals that wear armored plate. And with the help of Keith Shackleton at the drawing board,
Hello.
we'll get some idea of the surprising number and variety of these specialized animals. Everybody's familiar with this type. It's a terrapin pushing its head out of its turtleneck. And this huge sea turtle, it's a loggerhead cruising off an ocean beach. And a giant land tortoise from the Galapagos Islands. But not many will recognize this customer. It's an insect, a caddisfly larva. It's building a protective tube out of tiny pebbles, which it cements together to form a tiny mobile home. This will protect it from predators lurking on the river bottom. The ocean-living cockle has its own shell that it secretes as it grows. It's made mainly of calcium that the cockle extracts from salt water. It's one of the toughest armor plates in the whole natural world. Crabs are another example. Even their legs are armor plated. The garden snail is really just a slug with a shell on its back. Like the cockle, the snail makes its own shell, and as the snail grows, so does its shell. The armadillo has a really tough skin that doesn't really protect it from predators, but allows it to run through tough, prickly undergrowth where no predator could follow. Even its head and tail are covered by these tough scales. They're actually modified hairs. The pangolin looks a little like an armadillo, and in fact they are distantly related. It's sometimes called a scaly anteater. And though it has a real reptile look about it, it's a mammal like the armadillo. The pangolin's scales are also simply very specialized hairs. Crocodiles have true scales that cover their entire body. This is an Indian mugger crocodile about 9 feet long. Those large scales on the back have a bone inside them. Crocodiles are actually close relatives of the turtles we looked at a moment ago.
Sometimes people ask me, what would a turtle look like out of its shell? Ever had that question, Keith?
I have. It's what would you look like without your skin?
Exactly. Some people have the idea that turtles are like snails or even hermit crabs, that it's a boneless creature living inside a hard shell. But turtles are reptiles. They have backbones and rib cages and all the other bits of skeleton that go with being a reptile. Their shell is actually an adaptation of their skin, hardened like a crocodile's scales, and fused to their bones.
Here's an example, a Hermann's tortoise from southern Europe. And here's a Greek tortoise. Turtle design is obviously highly efficient. It hasn't changed in 300 million years. Both species look alike, but a good way to tell them apart is to look at the tail. The Hermann's tortoise on the right has a small hard scale on the very tip, and the Greek doesn't. Now, most people think of a tortoise as a slow-moving, ponderous creature, but that's not always the case. This is a gopher tortoise from Florida, and by turtle standards, it's really tearing along. It would never have caught up with a proverbial hare, but it could keep pace with a person out for a stroll. This is a baby leopard tortoise from East Africa, enjoying a meal of flowers. Tortoises are particularly fond of flowers, especially yellow ones. As well as leaves and fruit, some will eat meat in the form of dead animals or even a large, juicy earthworm. This one's no bigger than a tennis ball at the moment, but in 10 or 12 years' time, it'll be as big as a crash helmet and ready to find a mate. These are radiated tortoises from Madagascar. They're now very rare in the wild. Their courtship consists of the larger male pushing the female from behind. The clunking of their shells can be heard for hundreds of yards in the surrounding forests, and they'll go on like this all through the day and well into the evening.
There's another question I get asked a lot, and I'll bet you do too, Keith. What's the difference between a turtle, a tortoise, and a terrapin?
Yeah, I do, and it's very hard to answer.
We probably should try to give our audience an explanation. Maybe a drawing or two would help.
I think the foot. Let's start with a foot anyway and see where we go from there. It's the best clue, I think. Here's a very simple foot, very easy foot to draw. Square-ended, stubby, got 5 toes here. And it's got 5 very stubby little claws on the end. Looks like an elephant's foot, actually, but it's certainly the foot of a land animal, and that's a tortoise. Now, this foot is a much more elegant one, rather more fun to draw. Still got the 5 toes here, but they're spread out, much better defined toes, and they've got sometimes a bit of a web between them. There's another clue, because that is a water animal. But here's the difference. On the end of every one, a nice long claw. The claw of a carnivorous animal that has to tear up meat. And that is a terrapin.
Okay, a tortoise is a land animal, and a terrapin is a water animal, a freshwater animal, and that leaves the turtle. And I guess we can say that any of the marine versions, like loggerheads or leatherbacks, can be called turtles.
Absolutely.
So a tortoise is a land animal, a terrapin is a freshwater animal, and a turtle is a saltwater animal. And if you can't remember all that, don't worry. Call them all turtles and you'll be quite correct. These are giant tortoises, and we're in the Galapagos Islands. They're the world's biggest tortoises, reaching 4 or 5 feet in length and weighing up to 600 pounds. Their legs are thick and strong like an elephant's, and when they move, they lift that enormous shell and body right off the ground. But even a tortoise this size hatches from an egg no bigger than a hen's egg, although it could take 40 or 50 years to reach this size. We're back in Africa now with the baby leopard tortoise. Now, given the chance, all tortoises enjoy a drink, whether from a pond or a rain puddle. But they try to avoid getting wet, especially in a tropical rainstorm. And here's a terrapin. They live around ponds and rivers and spend most of their time in the water. Unlike the tortoises, they're mainly carnivorous, feeding on snails, insects, and frogs. They're pretty good swimmers, too. We've moved across the world to Asia now. This is a leaf terrapin, so named because when it's young, it looks like a leaf. It's about the size of a saucer. Although it lives mainly in water, it still has to come to the surface to breathe. It's feeding on winged termites that happen to have fallen into the river, and that little fish had better watch out too. The North American mud terrapin is among the world's smallest. Fully grown, it could easily sit in the palm of your hand. It spends almost its entire life in the water, hunting among vegetation. Those two little pieces of skin under the chin are very sensitive and can detect moving prey amongst the muddy bottom. Terrapins are found wherever there's fresh water throughout the warmer parts of the world, even in remote desert oases. This is an African mud terrapin. It's a little larger than its American cousin, perhaps a foot or so long. These desert pools have a habit of drying up occasionally, and when they do, the terrapin simply burrows down into the mud and sits it out until the next rains. They spend a lot of time basking in the sun, either on the bank or anywhere else they find suitable. The hippo doesn't seem to mind his passenger, but it's a good thing the terrapin has got that armor plating. Some terrapins hardly go near the water. This is the familiar box turtle found all over the United States. Although it's officially a terrapin, it behaves far more like a tortoise and only enters the water occasionally. Its shell is perfectly designed to give it maximum protection. The legs, head, and tail can all be drawn inside. The under part of the shell is hinged and can be closed like a drawbridge. Although it looks a little like a meat pie, its shell makes it almost impossible to eat. It's perfect armor against animals such as raccoons, badgers, rats, etc. that would normally eat it. Once the danger is past, the box turtle can slowly open up and emerge. Across the other side of the world, in Asia, a totally unrelated group of terrapins have developed exactly the same principle for defense. And not surprisingly, they're called the Asiatic box terrapins. The Asian box terrapin grows a little larger than the American one, perhaps to about 10 inches long, and it does spend a lot of time in and around the water, especially around mangrove swamps. Here they feed on crabs, fish, shrimp, and any other small animals they come across. While most terrapins have bony shells that completely cover their bodies, there are a few that have very little armor. Their mobile home consists of just a thick, leathery shell, and not surprisingly, they're called soft shells. You can see from their webbed feet that they spend most of their time underwater and rely on their speed, powerful claws, and razor-sharp jaws for defense. The mata-mata from South America relies on camouflage, not just to escape from predators, but mainly to fool its favorite food, fish. The fish thinks the terrapin is just another algae-covered rock and swims around it. When it comes within range of its head, the mata-mata strikes and the fish is gone. It takes a breath of air through its snorkel-like nose and moves off to fool some more fish.
Well, we've certainly seen some pretty bizarre characters among the terrapin group, and the tortoise group as well. So now it's time to take a look at the turtles. Maestro, a picture, please.
A picture, Thane, right. Well, remember the stumpy old tortoise foot, the land foot, the flatter terrapin foot with the meat-tearing claws. Now we're going into a group of animals with a completely different forelimb, a forelimb of graceful curves. Long and pointed. No claws like this, just a tiny bit of a claw that comes somewhere there. It's a paddle, a swim fin, a sea-going animal, and that is a turtle.
And here it is in person.
This is a loggerhead turtle cruising along off a sandy beach in the Pacific Ocean. These are the giants of the turtle family, and they're among the largest reptiles on Earth. Each year, the female turtles haul themselves up onto beaches like this to lay their eggs. It's always the very beach where they themselves were hatched. They usually emerge at dusk or under the cover of darkness to travel the furthest they'll ever venture from the water. She'll lay about 100 ping-pong ball-sized eggs in a hole in the sand and then laboriously fill it in. This is a leatherback turtle. What looks like a tear is in fact a stream of mucus to keep the eye free of sand. The leatherback lacks a hard body shell. Instead, it's covered by a thick, leathery skin. It's the equivalent among the turtles of the soft shell among the terrapins. Even though they have a relatively soft shell, only the largest of sharks could tackle one of these. This female is almost 9 feet long and probably weighs over 1,400 pounds. When she hatched on this beach over 20 years ago, she was only 2.5 inches long. Months later, and 2 feet below the surface, the loggerhead eggs are about to hatch. The young start to burrow their way to the surface. They're about the size of a matchbox and have to make the 30-yard dash to the sea as quickly as they can. If they manage to avoid the crabs and birds patrolling the beach and the sharks and other fish in the sea, they'll reach full size in 5 or 6 years, but only 1 out of 100 will make it. The leatherback turtles have also started to hatch and are now making their way to the sea, probably attracted by the moon reflecting on the waves. Their front flippers are each as long as their body. They're powerful swimmers, in fact, the fastest of all turtles. The baby leatherback will have to increase its weight over 10,000 times before it's fully grown. These green turtles are hatching on a beach in Bermuda. What happens to them during their first few months of life remains a mystery. They probably float around on sargassum weed, feeding on the small creatures that live among it. They'll grow quickly on this animal diet, and when they reach about a foot long, they'll turn vegetarian. This little one has been fitted with a float and radio transmitter, so the scientists can track its movements for a few days. The whole apparatus is then designed to fall off. Turtles have their share of natural enemies to keep their population in check. But over and above the natural enemies, they also have to contend with people, too. Here in South America, tortoises are hunted for food, as this pile of shells behind the local market testifies. The tortoises are called redfoots, and their tasty flesh has made them very rare. For hundreds of years, certain species of turtles and their eggs have been recognized as an important food source. But clearly it will help no one if these species are hunted into extinction. A combination of scientific research and careful conservation measures can do a great deal to help ensure that the red-footed tortoises, as well as their many cousins in the turtle family, will continue to live and thrive around the world.
You know, turtles have been around for 300 million years, and that's a very long time. They saw the dinosaurs come, and they saw them go. And that shell of theirs must be one of the main reasons for their success.
You're certainly a lot more successful than old Sir Lancelot here.
I hope you'll join us again next time for another look at Animals in Action.